Okay, so we've been talking a lot about the aggregate economy. Last unit, we talked a lot about what the economy looks like when it goes bad. And so, what we're going to do today is we're going to start to talk about two kind of different theories on what happens to an economy when it does go bad, right? So, we're going to start here with what is called the classical theory side. Now, classical theory is the theory that prevailed in our country from pretty much the beginning up until the mid 1900s. Right, so this kind of classical theory falls out of fashion just around the time of the Great Depression. Right, and so classical theory essentially says that there should be no government intervention, and that the economy would, quote, fix itself. Now, let's use our ADAS model to show you why they say that the government is not necessary to kick us out of a depression or a recession. Right. So we'll start here. Properly labeled graph, AD, short run aggregate supply, and let's say we'll start here at our full run equilibrium. Right. So let's assume this is where the economy starts, and then something happens, let's say, to the demand side. Let's say massive unemployment like we're experiencing. Well, now the economy shifts down to the left, and now our new equilibrium, where our economy is producing, is here. Okay, so now we have a recessionary gap, right? So we are underproducing in this economy. Now, what else do we know about what's happening in the economy? Well, number one, we know that the aggregate price level has decreased substantially from where it was up here. Okay, so we're trying to figure out why the classical theorists would say that the economy over time would fix itself. Well, let's think. So, aggregate price levels are cheaper. So, price levels for you, but that also means what for the suppliers? That means wages are going to be cheaper as well, right? Because if you have 6 million people unemployed, who has the upper hand in the employment situation now? The employer. So the employer can say, hey, you want this job, you're going to have to take it at this wage rate. And that wage rate may be lower than what the employee would like, but there's slim pickings for jobs. So wages are going to be decreased. But also, prices on inputs are going to be decreased as well. Just look at gas prices right now, right? Aggregate demand has shifted substantially down into the left right now during this coronavirus. Well, if you look at gas prices and prices for oil are substantially lower. So prices for them to produce their products are also going to be cheaper, right? So what do we know when your cost of production decreases markedly? We know from our micro level analysis, cost of production goes down, you can increase your supply. And so what classical theory says then is, as we shift to AD1, because of the decrease in wages and the decreases in prices, that's going to allow for the producers to increase the supply, and over time, look what happens. We've returned back to our full employment output. We are producing the same amount of money or the same amount of goods and services as we were previous to the recession, but now we are also having lower prices. Okay, so that is how the classical theorists would look at a recession. Now let's take a look at what they would say about a inflationary gap, where maybe the economy is operating too hot. So let's reset this up. GDP, zoinks, zippities up, and let's say here. Okay, so we're starting from this point. Now, let's say for whatever reason, the economy previous to the coronavirus, right, we were approaching nearly this point. But let's say the economy kept growing. Oops, let's get rid of that. And now the economy is past our potential output. Now, you may say, how can you operate past your potential output? Well, I'll say to you, it's possible in the short run. right? Overtime, things like this is possible due to things like overtime, buying up secondary or tertiary um, quality resources, right? So you may not be using the highest quality mahogany. Maybe you're using a substitute good so that the product is slightly inferior, but it's still generally the overall same product. So, but what do we notice here? We see upward level push on prices, right? So that upward pressure on prices is not sustainable, right? So if we then switch to here, now the prices are really starting to get out of control. And as we approach the more upward and more vertical portions of the short and aggregate supply curve, the engine's going to stall out, right? So businesses are going to be, there's going to be low unemployment to the point of you can't find people to work. That is going to cause upward pressure on wages because now you, the employee, have the upper hand, and you can say, "Hey, there are 8 businesses that need my work. You need to pay me more. I'm walking." That's going to put upward levels on wages. Other resources are going to start to get gobbled up, so upward level on resource prices. And as those things escalate, eventually it becomes unsustainable, and businesses are not going to be able to keep providing the amount of goods and services at these elevated prices. And so what happens? A leftward shift of the supply curve shifts you back. Unemployment ticks up, wages slow down, resource prices slow down. But look what happens. We return back to our full employment level, and now, as a consequence, we have slightly elevated prices than when we were operating here. But the point is, we have corrected back to our long run, just like we did here, right? So the classical theorists are all about the supply fixing the problem. Okay, and so the classical theory. Notice who did get involved there. There was no congressional action. There was no stimulus package. There was no tax increase or decrease. There was no Medicare, Medicaid. There were no social programs. This was all through the magic of the free market, right? And so this was the theory that prevailed for the first 200 and so years of our country. Then this sucker shows up, the Great Depression. And so the Great Depression, as we know, this didn't happen, right? We did not see a rebound back to the full employment levels. It took a very long time to get us back out of that depression. And so that gave that gave ammunition to people who thought the government needed to take a stronger role in the economy to, quote, prime the pump, to kind of push it out of a ditch, right? And so this brings us to the more modern Keynesian theory. Note the name Keynes there. So Keynes being John Maynard Keynes, who's the guy who comes up with, John Maynard Keynes guy who comes up with the theory of real GDP and how to calculate the size of an economy. Well, part of that, his theory, part of the reason he did this was so that he could implement his ideas about government intervention here. So Keynes, looking at the Great Depression, trying to figure out why the economy gets stuck like this so much lately, right? He's trying to figure out why we get stuck with this hole here, right? And so he figures out that in order for this to be feasible, what are the two things you need to have? You need to have wages that go down and prices that go down. And that's assuming that they are very flexible. But what Keynes figures out is that wages and prices are, quote, sticky, meaning they are not quite as quick to respond to changes in the overall macroeconomy as the classical theorists would have liked us to see. So he logics that because wages and prices are sticky, the self-correcting mechanism takes way too long to return us back to equilibrium. And in that time, there's a human cost to this. You had Hoovervilles and all those things that you learn about in APUS that were a big social cost on the country. So John Maynard Keynes, advocates by using his formula, looking inside aggregate demand, with this being the function, and essentially boosting these things through government programs. So tax cuts, social programs, stimulus packages like we're about to get in the mail, 1,200 bucks, baby, right? Government spending on things like infrastructure, right? Think about the New Deal, all the acronyms, the TWA, the ADA, the NRA, the Tennessee Valley Authority, all of those things. What were they really there for? They were there as what Keynes saw as stimulus to the economy. Because if this number is going down, if consumption is dropping like a rock, his logic was that you could balance the equation by injecting a crap ton of money into the government sector to kind of right the ship, to get money flowing through the economy. And that's still the prevailing economic understanding today, with some disagreement, because remember, FDR is doing this in 34, 35, 36, 37, and the Great Depression isn't ending. We're not out of the Great Depression. It's only in 1941 when the Japanese bomb us at Pearl Harbor and we turn all of our factories from, let's say, used to make TVs and food into gun manufacturers and plane manufacturers, did the economy turn around, right? But this is the Keynesian model, right? It moves away from letting the free market do what it does naturally, and moves it more towards the government being involved in fixing these problems. Okay, and so these are the two kind of major differences. Notice with Keynesian theory, it's all about demand. Right? What can we do to get this guy back here? Whereas with with classical, it's all about how the free market allows suppliers to return us back to equilibrium. Right? So typically, you hear the word supply. Classical theory, if you want to talk about politics here, typically this is stuff you'll hear out of Republicans' mouths. Typical Republicans. President Trump is an exception. And then this is typically stuff you'll hear out of the mouths of Democrats, right? That the government needs to step in to boost the economy, and that the government does not need to step in, that let the free market do what it does best. Okay, so if you have any questions, you know where I am. That is the major kind of ideological difference that underlines most of our economic understanding today. So let me find the button to stop this, and we'll see you next time. Okay, where's the button to stop this? Sorry, guys.